Hello everybody. I did my final project on teaching math literacy in a STEM world. I picked this topic because I want to be a high school math teacher and I've always really loved reading and math, so the combination of both really intrigued me. Also, I chose this topic because currently South Carolina students are really struggling in their reading scores and their math scores. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 70% of South Carolina 8th graders scored less than proficient on the reading assessment, and 74% of South Carolina 8th graders scored less than proficient on the math assessment. So if we're looking at that study, we can really see that students already in 8th grade really need help in both math and reading, and the combination of those is really helpful for the students to succeed. So when I was researching, I looked at what current literacy educators are saying, and I also looked at what math educators are saying. So some of the current theories in the literacy world are talking about how you're using reading and writing. Are you using reading and writing to teach, or are you teaching skills for students to really progress in their reading and writing skills? And so literacy educators also say that every content area can incorporate some form of literacy development. So I heard a motto that says basically every teacher is a literacy teacher. Every teacher has to have some type of literacy education so that their students can succeed in conveying whatever they're learning in that classroom. Additionally, math educators, before they went into these studies, had some opinions about incorporating literacy. Some of these opinions I found in some of the studies I looked at, and they said that literacy and math are completely separate topics. You can't really teach reading and writing and math. That's what they thought. And another one said they didn't want to add on to their curriculum. They didn't want to make their lesson plans longer or any more intense than they already are. And another teacher also opinionated that they are not qualified to teach literacy. In math education courses, you know the material, but you might not know how to incorporate literacy and feel qualified enough to do that. So the studies that we looked at really engaged in those math educators, and they also collaborated with literacy educators to find the common ground and see what they could accomplish. So one of the studies I looked at was Moses' algebra project, and he actually was a civil rights activist, and then he created this algebra project where he took math and applied it to his students' lives because he thought that the students weren't really engaged in the material and they really, really needed the algebra to succeed. Algebra is one of the topics at any level of job, you really need it. And just to be a normal citizen, you have to have algebra to really succeed and do well. You can find deals at the grocery store using algebra. It's just everywhere in our life we need it. And so what he did is he reinvented the algebra program and used lessons that talked about African drums or subway systems and how students can use their algebra skills to get through their lives a little bit easier. Another study had a professional development for math educators and literacy educators. And in this one, they actually had them work together and they had them co-teach in a classroom. So the teachers really had to overcome what they thought were differences between the two subjects to see what the commonalities were and how they can incorporate more literacy in their instruction. And afterwards, they said, wow, I didn't really realize I was using so much literacy already, but I was. And then they found other techniques to really strengthen their literacy instruction. And then afterwards, in all the studies where they had some type of professional development, the teachers really were more optimistic about their capability of teaching literacy in the classroom. So that was really awesome to see that teachers were making changes even if they had been teachers for a really long time and doing the same things for a really long time. So which strategies worked best? Like the algebra project, curriculum and student interests. When you find the common ground, how can I apply this to my students' lives? The students really pick up on that and they're way more engaged in the material when they can see direct applications. So that's another way to increase math literacy so that if you present them a problem that relates to their life, they can find ways to really articulate and convey their answer to other people who might not know what they're doing in the classroom. That's a skill that's really important in any type of job if you're problem solving and you need to be able to read and write and reflect on what the processes are that you solved a problem with. The other one was vocabulary intervention. So a lot of students, I mentioned in my paper, get really confused with math and vocabulary because the words that sometimes occur in math also occur in their regular vocabulary. For instance, the word run is typically what we think a speed faster than walking, but in math, it's also part of your slope. And so if students aren't really grasping the material, they can't progress without the proper vocabulary to convey what they're saying, and even to ask questions. If you don't understand the words, like, you can't really formulate a question to really pinpoint what you're having trouble with. And then the other step was incorporating reflection. So some teachers created bigger project-based learning where they had a reflection part where their students had to write down their problem-solving skills and then how they got their way to an answer and what happened if they got it wrong. And they really had to write out their thinking process, which helped them solve the problem better and also helped them with their literacy skills, that they're reading and writing and looking out for steps. Like if you're writing an essay, you have to have a step of what you're going to do first, much like a math problem. And I also put in there Desmos activities because Desmos has a huge component on their website, which is all activities that teachers can use. They're free, and they pose really fun problems for students, like how can you launch this ball to go into the bucket way over there? And then the students have to problem solve and then also judge situations and write down their thoughts, like, whoa, what do you think would happen if the bucket was to the left or to the right, and solve those problems from there. So why did I choose this topic? I said earlier that I really love reading and math, and the intersection of both of those has been so fun for me to learn, and especially in grad school, like seeing how both of those can help a student so much is important. And also, I plan to teach in South Carolina, so I know that South Carolina students really need better reading and math instruction because their scores are so low. So what can we do to make that easier for the students? What can we do to make that more applicable to their lives so they're more engaged in the material? And then lastly, how to make math even more fun. I love math so much, and everyone, sometimes people say like, oh, like, you like math? Wow, that's really difficult. I can never do that. But it's really so practical for your everyday life, and how can we make that math a little more accessible to people who think that's not for them? And that's really the gist of my project. I hope you enjoyed. Here are my works cited.